He had answered every question correctly, every single one. In a fast money round that required a combined score of 200 points to win $20,000, the man standing at the podium had delivered 5 answers in 20 seconds with a precision and a confidence that the studio audience had responded to with the specific, sustained warmth reserved for people who are clearly doing something difficult and are doing it right. He had not hesitated. He had not second-guessed. He had answered the way a person answers when they have spent 12 weeks preparing for the most important 20 seconds of the year, and when the reason they have been preparing is standing in a children's hospital 45 minutes from their house waiting for an answer that only money can provide. His partner, his sister Gloria, had answered her 5 questions first and scored 111 points. He needed 89 more. He scored 88, 199 combined. 1 point. His name was Marcus Reed. He was 51 years old. He was standing at the Family Feud podium in a studio in Los Angeles on a Thursday afternoon in August 2024, looking at a number that was 1 unit short of the only thing he had come to this city for, and he was holding himself together with the specific, deliberate composure of a man who has had a great deal of practice at not falling apart in public. Steve Harvey had been watching him since the buzzer. He walked to Marcus. He stopped in front of him. He said nothing for a moment, and then he said the thing that no one in that room, including Marcus Reed, had been expecting. What Steve Harvey said was 6 words. 6 words broke a man who had not broken for 3 years. What happened in the 17 minutes that followed was not a game show. It was the most complete act of witness that any of the 200 people in that studio had experienced in their professional lives. Marcus Reed had grown up in Indianapolis, the eldest of 4 children in a household presided over by parents who had established, through example rather than instruction, that the measure of a person was not what they acquired, but what they sustained. His father had worked for 30 years as a postal carrier. His mother had been a teacher's aide at the elementary school Marcus attended, which had produced in him, across his childhood, the specific experience of being watched by the same person in both his domestic and his institutional life, and who had found this arrangement, after an initial period of resistance, more steadying than he had expected. He had become a structural engineer working across a 24-year career in Indianapolis on the specific, unglamorous category of infrastructure projects that cities require and do not celebrate: bridge assessments, drainage system evaluations, the ongoing maintenance of the built environment that makes ordinary life in a dense urban area possible. His work was careful and methodical and consequential in ways that were invisible when performed correctly, which he had always considered the most honest definition of important work. He had married his wife, Theresa, in 1999 when he was 26 and she was 24. Their marriage had been, in the accounting of everyone who knew them, genuinely good in the foundational sense: honest, warm, built on mutual respect, and the shared conviction that the 2 children they were raising deserved the complete attention of both of them. Theresa had been a school counselor at a high school in Indianapolis for 22 years, and the combination of her professional instincts and Marcus's structural patience had produced, over 24 years of marriage, a household that was both organized and warm, which Marcus had always considered an uncommon and therefore precious combination. Their daughter, Nia, was born in 2004 and had been, from the moment of her arrival, the organizing fact of both their lives. Nia had grown up with her father's methodical patience and her mother's emotional intelligence, which meant she was simultaneously precise and perceptive, a combination that had made her an exceptional student and an unusually self-aware young person. She had been identifying, by the time she was 14, the specific intersection of biology and psychology that she wanted to work in professionally, and by the time she was 17 she had articulated, with a specificity that her parents had found both remarkable and entirely plausible, that she intended to become a neurodevelopmental pediatrician. Their son Jordan was 5 years younger than Nia, now 19, and had inherited his father's engineering instincts and his mother's warmth in the specific combination that made him the kind of young man whose friends' parents, invariably asked where they had found him. Theresa had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2018. The diagnosis had arrived at stage 2, with the specific clinical clarity that neurological diagnoses require a relapsing, remitting presentation that was treatable, manageable with the appropriate medication protocol, and progressive in ways that the neurologist described honestly, and that both Marcus and Theresa had received with the composure of adults who had been in hard conversations before and who understood that composure was a form of respect for the person delivering the information. The management of Theresa's condition had required, across 6 years, the kind of sustained, daily attention that did not present as a crisis on any given day, but that accumulated over time into a comprehensive reorganization of what the household required. Marcus had adjusted his work schedule. He had modified the house. He had learned, with the same methodical patience he brought to structural engineering, the specific, practical vocabulary of his wife's condition, the medication protocols, the physical therapy regimens, the indicators that a relapse was approaching, and the logistical requirements of a life that had to accommodate both his wife's needs and the ongoing professional and educational trajectories of 2 children who deserved not to feel that their mother's illness had narrowed their own possibilities. Naya had begun medical school in the fall of 2023 at a university in Chicago that had offered her admission with a partial scholarship. The partial scholarship had covered 60% of the first-year cost. The remaining 40% had required a financial plan that Marcus and Theresa had constructed with the systematic attention that their circumstances required a combination of their existing savings, a federal loan for which Nia qualified, and a parental contribution that Marcus had structured as a monthly commitment rather than a lump sum, because the monthly structure allowed it to coexist with the ongoing medical expenses that Theresa's condition continued to produce. In February of 2024, Nia had been hospitalized, not for anything related to her mother's illness, for her own. The diagnosis was an autoimmune condition affecting her joints, unrelated to Theresa's MS, but sufficiently debilitating in its acute phase that she had been unable to complete her first-year examinations and had been placed on a medical leave of absence from the program. The medical leave had triggered a review of her scholarship, which the university's financial aid office had placed on hold pending her return to full-time status. The hold applied retroactively to the semester in which the hospitalization had occurred. The scholarship hold created a gap of $14,000 that had to be addressed before Nia could return to the program in the fall. Marcus had been addressing it for 6 months with the full methodical attention of a structural engineer confronting a problem whose solution requires finding load-bearing capacity where none had previously been identified. He had applied for 2 medical hardship grants. He had negotiated a deferment arrangement with the university. He had identified every available option and had, by June of 2024, closed the gap to approximately $9,000, which had proved resistant to every remaining method available to him. The Family Feud application had been submitted by his sister Gloria in March. At the same moment she had shown up at Marcus's house with groceries and had stayed for 4 hours without being asked, which was consistent with who Gloria had always been, and which Marcus had accepted with the quiet gratitude of a man who knew that some forms of help could not be declined without disrespecting both the offer and the person making it. She had told him about the application in April. He had said they would need to prepare carefully. She had said she had already begun. They had prepared for 12 weeks. Marcus, Gloria, his brother-in-law Derek, his cousin Patris, and Theresa, who had insisted on being part of the preparation sessions from her chair at the living room table, and who had turned out, to no one's surprise, to be the most accurate predictor of survey answers in the group, because 22 years of school counseling had given her an exact understanding of how ordinary people thought about ordinary things, had studied together every Sunday and over calls during the week, with the systematic rigor of a team that understood the stakes and had no patience for anything less than full preparation. Naya had not been told the full reason for the trip. Marcus had told her only that the family was doing something fun and that he would tell her the rest when there was something to tell. Nia had said that was a very engineer thing to say. Marcus had agreed that it was. The family the Reeds were paired against in the main game was the Okonkwo family from Houston, a multi-generational group whose competitive energy had been organized across the taping day into something both formidable and genuinely warm. The Okonkwas were well prepared and fast, and the main game between the two families had the quality of a genuinely well-matched contest where neither side dominated and where the final margin was the product of consistent execution rather than a single decisive moment. The Reed family won by 9 points, which Marcus received with the composed satisfaction that those who knew him would have recognized as his standard expression of having done the thing correctly. The fast money format placed Gloria first and Marcus closing. This arrangement had been their deliberate preparation from the beginning of the 12 weeks. Gloria had the faster instinct for common survey answers, the product of a career in healthcare administration where understanding what ordinary people wanted and feared and hoped for had been a daily professional necessity. Marcus had the deeper and more systematic preparation and the specific kind of knowledge that comes from a structural engineer who has spent 24 years assessing what holds and what fails under pressure. Gloria's 20 seconds began. Name something people do when they cannot sleep. Gloria said, watch TV. Number 1 answer 43 points. Name a reason someone might cancel plans at the last minute. Gloria said, they got sick. Number 1 answer, 41 points. Name something you find in every medicine cabinet. Gloria said, aspirin. Number 2 answer 31 points. Name something that is hard to say out loud. Gloria said, I am sorry. Number 2 answer, 27 points. Name something a doctor tells you to do more of. Gloria said, sleep. Number 3 answer 19 points. The buzzer sounded. Gloria's total 161 points. The audience responded with the warm urgency of people doing mental arithmetic. 161 points was an exceptional score. Marcus needed 39 points across 5 answers, none repeating Gloria's, was a number that made the room feel that the outcome was essentially secured. The mathematics had the comfortable quality of a problem that has been reduced to a formality. Steve Harvey shook his head with the warm theatrics he reserved for exceptional scores. 161 points, ladies and gentlemen. Gloria Reed. He turned to Marcus. Marcus, you need 39 points. After what your sister just did, 39 points should feel like a thank you note. Go get them. Marcus stepped to the podium. He adjusted his collar once. The single, reflexive gesture that those who had watched 12 weeks of preparation had come to recognize as his physical signal that he was fully present and ready. He placed his hands flat on the podium surface. He nodded to the clock operator. His 20 seconds began. Name something people do when they cannot sleep. He could not say watch TV. He said, read a book. Number 2 answer 29 points. The family had already cleared 39. The audience began to celebrate. Marcus did not celebrate. He continued, name a reason someone might cancel plans at the last minute. He could not say they got sick. He said, work emergency. Number 4 answer 8 points. Name something you find in every medicine cabinet. He could not say aspirin. He said, bandages. Number 3 answer 19 points. Name something that is hard to say out loud. He could not say I am sorry. He said, I need help. Number 4 answer 7 points. Name something a doctor tells you to do more of. He could not say sleep. He said, exercise. Number 1 answer 53 points. The buzzer sounded. Marcus's totaled it. 116 points. The studio began to calculate. 161 plus 116, 277 points. A dominant win. The Reed family had won $20,000 by a margin that removed any ambiguity from the outcome. The celebration was immediate and genuine. Gloria embraced her brother before the total had fully registered on the board. Derek had his arms in the air. Patrice was crying. Theresa, watching from the family seating area, had her hands pressed together over her heart. Marcus stood at the podium. He did not move into the celebration. He stood with both hands on the podium surface and his shoulders very still, and the expression on his face was not the expression of a man absorbing a win. It was the expression of a man absorbing something that the wind had released. Something that had been held for 3 years through Theresa's diagnosis and its daily management, through Nia's hospitalization and the scholarship hold, and the 6 months of working the problem with every available method. Something that had been held through 12 weeks of Sunday preparation sessions and Theresa answering survey questions from her chair. Something that had been held since February when the letter from the university's financial aid office had arrived and the number 9,000 had become the shape of the year. The wind had made the holding unnecessary, and the cessation of necessary holding, when it arrives after a long period, does not announce itself as joy. It announces itself as the specific, overwhelming release of everything that has been compressed by the necessity of holding it. Steve Harvey was watching. He had been watching Marcus since the beginning of the main game with the focused attention of a man who has spent 16 seasons learning to see the person beneath the contestant. He had seen the stillness that was not calm but controlled, the precision that was not confidence but preparation, the quality of someone whose entire presence at the podium was organized around something that had nothing to do with the game and everything to do with what the game could provide. He crossed to Marcus. He stood beside him. He waited for a moment. Then he said 6 words. The 6 words were, "Tell me what this was for." He did not say it to the audience. He said it directly to Marcus, in the register he used when he was asking a real question rather than conducting an interview. The distinction was audible to everyone in the room. Marcus Reed looked at Steve Harvey. He was quiet for a moment that was not empty but full of the specific deliberation of a man who has been asked a genuine question and who is deciding whether the room is safe enough to answer it genuinely. He decided it was. He told Steve what the $20,000 was for. He told him about Theresa's MS and the 6 years of daily management. He told him about Nia's medical school admission and the partial scholarship and the financial plan constructed across 24 years of marriage between 2 people who had always done the thing correctly. He told him about February and the hospitalization and the autoimmune diagnosis and the scholarship hold and the letter from the university's financial aid office. He told him about 6 months of applying every available method to a $9,000 gap that had proved resistant to all of them. He told him that Nia needed to return to the program in the fall and that the gap had to be closed before she could. He told him that Nia was going to be a neurodevelopmental pediatrician. He said it the way fathers say things about their children's futures that they have been carrying for a long time and that have grown over the carrying, from a hope into a certainty, not because certainty was warranted, but because some children produce in their parents the specific, irrational conviction that the future they are working toward is real and has always been real and simply needs the obstacles between here and there addressed one at a time. The studio listened in the way it had learned to listen this season, completely, without the ambient noise of a room waiting for the next thing, because the next thing was already here. Steve Harvey was quiet after Marcus finished. He let what had been said sit in the room for the time it needed. "I want to ask you something," he said. "Something specific." He held Marcus's gaze. In the 3 years since Theresa was diagnosed, through the management, the adjustments, Nia's hospitalization, the gap, the 6 months of working the problem, have you been all right? The question was so direct that it landed in the room like a physical thing. Marcus Reed, who had not broken for 3 years, broke at the question. Not the answer, the question. He put one hand over his face for a moment. When he lowered it, he was still composed in the technical sense, but what was visible underneath the composure was the honest answer to a question that no one had asked him in 3 years. "No," he said. "No. I have been managing. That is different from being all right." The room held what he said in the specific silence that true things produce when they are said simply. Steve Harvey nodded once. "That," he said to the audience, "is what 3 years of being the person everyone else needs you to be sounds like when someone finally asks." He turned back to Marcus. "Managing is not the same thing as all right. and you have been managing with a precision and a commitment that your wife knows and your children know and that this room is now going to know. You drove to Los Angeles for your daughter. You prepared for 12 weeks. You won this game. He paused. And you are going to go home and you are going to continue managing because that is what the situation requires. But I need you to know something before you go. He looked at Marcus directly. It is okay to not be all right sometimes. Not being all right is not failing. It is being human. And you have been so committed to managing that you have not had space to be human in 3 years. I am not going to fix that in this room, but I can make the managing a little easier. He reached into his jacket. The Steve and Marjorie Harvey Foundation supports families who are managing things that most people do not have to manage, and who are doing it with the kind of sustained, daily courage that does not announce itself and does not get recognized, and that makes everything possible for the people around them. He produced an envelope. This is a check for $20,000 from the foundation. Combined with the prize money, that is $40,000. Nia's gap is closed. Theresa's next year of medical management has a reserve. And you, he said, and he paused with the deliberateness of a man who wants the next thing to be heard precisely. You are going to sleep through one night without doing the arithmetic. I am telling you that this is not optional. You have earned it. Marcus Reed took the envelope. He held it with both hands. He looked at it. He looked at Theresa, who was in the family seating area with her hands still pressed together, watching him with the expression of a woman who has known this man for 26 years and who is seeing, in this moment, something she has been watching him carry without being able to relieve him of it. He looked at Gloria, and at Derek, and at Patrice. Then he looked at Steve Harvey. Nobody asked. He said it was not an accusation. It was simply the accurate answer to the implicit question of what the breaking had been about. 3 years. Nobody asked if I was all right. Steve Harvey looked at him steadily. I am asking now, he said. Marcus Reed nodded. He pressed his lips together once. Then he said, with the quiet precision of a structural engineer who has assessed the situation and confirmed the finding, thank you. The studio rose. The episode aired 5 weeks after the taping. The production team preserved the full sequence without compression, from Steve Harvey's 6-word question through Marcus's final 2 words. The sequence ran for 17 minutes and 24 seconds. The episode received the highest overnight ratings of the program's current season. The element that generated the most sustained and most specific public response was the exchange around the question itself. Tell me what this was for. And more particularly the moment when Steve Harvey asked Marcus whether he had been all right and Marcus answered no and said that managing was different from being all right. This exchange, distilled to its essential 30 seconds, circulated in caregiver communities, in mental health advocacy spaces, and in the specific online forums that people who are performing sustained competence under sustained pressure inhabit when they are, privately, not doing well. The responses described recognition in terms that recurred across communities and demographics, the experience of seeing something named that had been experienced without a name, and the specific relief that naming produced even in people whose circumstances bore no surface resemblance to Marcus Reed's. A clinical psychologist in Atlanta wrote a column in a professional publication about what she called the managing versus all right distinction. The gap between functional performance under pressure and genuine well-being, which her practice encountered regularly in caregivers, first responders, parents of children with chronic illness, and others for whom sustained competence was both necessary and isolating. She noted that Steve Harvey's question had done something that therapeutic frameworks frequently attempted and rarely achieved in a single exchange. It had made the distinction visible to a person who had not previously articulated it, in a context where the visibility was welcome rather than threatening. The column was shared widely outside its professional audience. The $40,000 was addressed with the systematic attention that characterized everything Marcus did. Nia's scholarship gap was closed within the week. $14,000 resolved in a single transfer that Marcus made from his laptop at the kitchen table on a Saturday morning, with Theresa beside him and their coffee going cold because neither of them was paying attention to it. The transfer cleared. The university's financial aid office confirmed Nia's return to full-time status. The scholarship reinstatement letter arrived the following Tuesday. Marcus read it twice and handed it to Theresa without a word. Theresa read it. Then she set it down and put her hand over his. They sat at the kitchen table for a while in the specific comfortable silence of two people who have been navigating something difficult together for a long time and who have just been given, without requesting it, a moment in which the navigation is easier than it has been. A reserve of $12,000 was established in a dedicated account organized around the medical expenses that Theresa's condition continued to require. Marcus structured it with the same discipline he had applied to the college account and the monthly contributions as a non-discretionary resource whose purpose was defined and whose draw-down would be systematic rather than reactive. The remaining $14,000 addressed the accumulated deferred maintenance of a household that had been prioritizing essential expenses for 3 years, and that had, in consequence, a list of deferred items that ranged from a failing water heater to a car repair that had been postponed twice. He addressed them in the order determined by structural consequence, which was the only order that made sense to him. Nia returned to medical school in September. Her first-day message to her parents arrived at 7:30 in the morning. Before her first class, a photograph of the lecture hall with the caption, "Back. Thank you." 2 words. Marcus had showed it to Theresa. Theresa had showed it to no one because some things did not require an audience. Marcus called Nia that evening. The call lasted 45 minutes. He told her, toward the end of it, that the trip to Los Angeles had been about her gap. Nia was quiet for a moment. Then she said she had suspected as much and had decided not to ask, because she had known her father well enough to know that asking would have produced a response organized around not worrying her. Marcus said that was exactly right. Nia said she appreciated that he had not asked her to pretend she did not notice things. Marcus said he had always considered pretending not to notice things a waste of the attention she had been given. Steve Harvey received a note from Marcus through the production team 6 weeks after the episode aired. It was 3 sentences. The first confirmed that Nia had returned to medical school and that her scholarship had been reinstated. The second said that Theresa was stable and that the reserve had already proved useful in a way that had not been predicted, but that had required a response, which it had been possible to provide. The third sentence said, "Someone asked me how I was. I am going to try to answer that question honestly more often." Steve Harvey read the note in his office. He set it down on his desk, next to the other things he kept there that served the same function, objects and words that reminded him of what the 16 years of this work had actually been for. He has not moved the note. He does not intend to. Marcus Reed is still in Indianapolis. He is still at the County Roads Department, still 24 years in, still doing the work that makes ordinary movement through the county possible and that nobody thinks about until it fails. He is still the person his colleagues call when the assessment needs to be done correctly the first time. He has made one change. On the first Sunday of each month he calls Jordan, not to discuss anything specific, but simply to talk, and to ask his son how he is, and to mean the question. Jordan has noted the change without commenting on it, which is consistent with the specific form of attentiveness that Jordan has always had and that Marcus has always considered evidence of something Theresa gave him. He calls Nia on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She answers on the first ring. They discuss her coursework and his work and Theresa's latest clinical review, and occasionally they discuss nothing in particular, which Marcus had previously considered an inefficient use of time and which he now considers among the most useful things available. He slept through a night in September. He had not slept through a full night since January of 2021, when Theresa's diagnosis had reorganized what sleep required of him. He woke in the morning and lay still in the quiet of an ordinary Monday and thought about the question Steve Harvey had asked, and he considered whether the answer had changed. He decided it had changed by a degree that was not dramatic, But that was real, which in structural engineering was the only form of change that mattered, not the change that announced itself, but the change that held. He was managing. He was also, for the first time in 3 years, doing something that was slightly more than managing. He did not yet have a precise word for it. He was working on finding one. He suspected Theresa would have one. She usually did.